Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the San Diego mayoral debate on KPBS, part of our Public Matters project with inewsource and Voice of San Diego. I'm KPBS Public Matters investigative reporter Amita Sharma. Tonight, we will hear from incumbent San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria and challenger Larry Turner about their visions for San Diego and how they would solve the biggest challenges here in California's second largest city. They will be answering questions posed by our panelists, KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen, inewsource managing editor Jamie Self, and Voice of San Diego CEO and editor-in-chief Scott Lewis. Tonight's debate will focus on three areas: housing and homelessness, public safety, and money matters, both for the city budget and for San Diego residents. This will be our format. Each panelist will ask a question. The candidates will take turns answering and will get 2 minutes for their answers. There is a clock in front of the stage so the candidates can keep track of the time. We will allow opportunities for rebuttal, and I may redirect a question as needed. At the end of this hour, each candidate will get 90 seconds for a closing statement. Our studio audience has been asked to hold their applause so that each candidate gets plenty of time to make their points. Before this broadcast, we held a coin toss to determine who would get the final closing statement. The winner of that toss was Mayor Gloria. So the first question tonight will go to Larry Turner. But before we begin to discuss housing, we want to give each candidate 1 minute to tell voters why they should be elected. Mr. Turner, we begin with you.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for holding this event. It's really great to get a chance to talk, especially with a big group of people out here. And I always love the opportunity to share my vision for the city. You know, I've been serving you all for a very long time. Most of you didn't know me while I was doing it. I was off in the shadows doing it around the world. I did 23 years in the United States Marine Corps, where I served in combat operations, humanitarian relief operations. I led thousands of people around the world and billions of dollars in budgets. And when I came back to retire in San Diego, you know, that was just going to be the thing. I was going to stay here. I want to just be a San Diegan, enjoy San Diego. Unfortunately, some things kind of went wrong while I was away for most of the time, and ended up joining the police department to try to help the city in the best way I could. I've always been a public servant and always wanted to be out there and helping in any way I could. So I joined the police department. I was a SWAT team. I was a patrol officer, trained new officers. But then I became a community relations officer. I've been out there serving you all for the last 4 years, the business associations, the churches, the schools, you know, everybody out there. And I really have a great understanding of San Diego and what needs to change. As an employee of the city, working with elected officials, and my experience, executive leadership experience around the world. Thank you.
Mr. Gloria.
Thank you, Amita. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. You know, I'm a third-generation San Diegan, native San Diegan who grew up in Claremont, the son of two working-class parents who raised my brother and I to believe that our responsibility in life is to leave things better than you found it. I don't know that they knew it at the time, but that really was a recipe for a career in public service. I've been honored to serve my hometown throughout my career as a housing commissioner, as a city council member, state legislator, and now as your mayor. And I've had the honor of doing this job of mayor during some of the most difficult times that we've experienced in a century. A global pandemic, economic recession, social and political unrest has challenged us greatly. But we've been able to tackle all of those challenges while making meaningful progress on issues like road repair, homelessness, housing affordability, and on crime. I look forward to sharing more about my record and why I'd like the opportunity to continue to lead my hometown for another 4 years with you all this evening.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the first topic, which is housing. Jamie, you get the first question.
Sure, thank you. First question for you, Mr. Turner. In San Diego, each month, more people become homeless than find housing. You've been a vocal critic of the mayor's approach to dealing with homelessness in the city, and also his proposed 1,000-bed shelter near the airport. If you're elected, what is your specific plan to create shelter for unhoused San Diegans, and how would it differ from the work that the mayor and his team are already doing?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And we just have a very different view of what the problem really is. You know, I have a view from talking to thousands of people out on the street and all the service providers and seeing what has worked. You know, we use a totally different diagnosis of the problem. The diagnosis he's using is why it's failing. And, you know, even 4 years ago, Father Joe, who's passed since then, you know, he alerted us all that Todd Gloria's plan was not going to work. It was going to fail, and it has. As you said, it's been increasing. Even by his own numbers, it's increased by double. I'm going to tell you that it's more than that. There are places that, unfortunately, we don't count. We don't count accurately. There's places where people hide. The mayor has people pushed off into Caltrans property where they don't count as San Diegans anymore. So there's got to be a totally different approach on how we're going to tackle this problem and understanding the people that are going to be the customers of those services we're going to provide. So the first thing I do is on day one, we got to put tourniquets on all the beds that we're losing. You know, he has had temporary Band-Aid approaches to this. Many of these beds are going to be gone in January. You know, he's going to tout, you know, all the new shelter opportunities. They're not beds. He's changed the definition of that to where living in a parking lot or living in your car is something that is an opportunity. That's not helping homeless people. But regardless, we've got to get in there. We've got to stop the bleeding on those, whatever it takes. We've got to stop those beds from going, or else we're going to have another 1,000 people on the street in January. So right away, when I come in, we do that. After that, it's about the cluster system. This is a thing that we do in the State Department and USAID did it all over the place. You bring in all those non-governmental organizations, all the great people that know what they're doing, bring them to the table, come up with agreeable definitions of success, agreeable definitions of what those metrics are going to be, how we're going to judge them on that. And then they all open their books too, where that money's going, how it's being spent, and we see where that success is. Another thing is that we start to look at getting a czar, an actual homeless czar, that's going to be the point person on this, going to be working with those organizations in that system that I talked about. And then going on a little bit faster is we're going to have separation of the people and not just have giant 1,000-bed facilities. Everybody's against that. The IBA, the city attorney, even the Regional Task Force on Health on Homelessness says that's a horrible plan.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mayor Gloria, obviously this has been a huge challenge for your administration. Mr. Turner mentioned the role that tents have played in your solution. Of course, when you pitched the camping ban last year, you promised to increase indoor shelter capacity. Today, more than half of those options are tents and temporary campsites that the city has set up. You've said yourself, this is not mission accomplished. So why should voters entrust you with resolving this issue moving forward?
Sure. Well, I just would reflect that there was no plan in that answer just a moment ago. There's the reflexive opposition that we see from many people who are afraid of change when we work on this issue. That's not what a leader does. A leader has to set forward a plan and execute it, and that's what we've been doing. You know, our homelessness crisis is not unique to the city of San Diego. All major American cities are dealing with this crisis. But what are we doing? Well, we start with an outreach effort where we have trained folks who work every single day to make repeated contacts with individuals to build the trust and rapport to get them to say yes to shelter services. And when they do, they must have a bed available for them. In my time as your mayor, we've increased shelter capacity in the city by over 70%. We've diversified that portfolio to have congregate and non-congregate options that are specific to folks who are survivors of domestic violence, drug addiction, LGBTQ youth, senior citizens, women-only shelters. And yes, we have expanded our safe parking lots because, interestingly, that's the #1 growing part of our homeless population. But we've also created the safe sleeping sites. And I'll tell you why those are important. Our data shows that over 80% of the folks who are accessing our safe sleeping sites are accessing our homeless shelter system for the very first time. This is helping us to reach folks who we've never been previously able to bring in off the streets, surround them with the services to diagnose the underlying causes of their homelessness, and then help us address it. So we go from the outreach to the shelter. Shelter is not the end point. We have to build more housing. We got to get people into permanent housing. My administration has been vocally and very clearly pro-housing. And as we build more housing, this will help the issue. And last but certainly not least is that we have to address the issues of addiction and mental illness. You've seen me use the responsibilities of the Office of the Mayor to go to Sacramento and get the most substantial behavioral health reforms in our state's history in over 60 years, in the care corps and conservatorship reform, passing Proposition 1. Now it's the time to implement it. So I want the opportunity to do 4 more years to continue to expand our outreach, continue to expand our shelters, build more housing, and implement that mental health reform so that we can get the most vulnerable off of our streets for good.
Mr. Turner, do you want to respond?
Yeah, sure. You know, I talk to groups all the time. I've been to a number of debates that the mayor doesn't show up to, where we talk for hours, we take questions from the community. I can spend 20, 30 minutes just talking about my plan for this, and I have to thousands of people around the city. If you want to look up my plan, look up LarryTurnerForMayor.com, and there's plenty of videos on there where I spend a half hour talking about how we're going to do this in detail. So yeah, this 30-second response, 2-minute answers, this isn't really what it's like when you have to really deal with the people. They're the ones that want to know the details of your plan. Anytime you want to see me, I'm always having events around the city. Come ask me your questions. On my website, there's a Larry Listens button where you can ask me any question and I can explain it in detail. I'm about to do the very thing that you're criticizing, but we have so much territory to cover tonight. I know it's not ideal. Scott, you have the next question on housing.
Yeah, Mr. Turner, You recently said that the major problem with the city's camping ban on public lands was that police had to encounter people several times before they could do anything about it, cite them or arrest them. What is behind that? What is your hope that would be changed if you change that? What impacts would changing that have? Would it just mean, is it just a way of saying that more homeless residents need to go to jail?
Yeah, not at all. So it goes into a bigger plan, and that is we have to have the bed spaces available for them. Again, not parking lots, not ice fishing tents that don't have bottoms and have holes on the roof, not putting them so close together that the UN representative on refugee camps gave it a failing grade. This is about places where people live, where they've got the wraparound services and that continuum of care to move their way up all the way to where they finally get that key to an apartment. They've got a job. They've got the job skills training that we give them. Whatever that success story is going to be for each person, it's going to be a little bit different. Understand that. But let's go back to the 4 steps that you talked about. Right now, we don't have enough police in San Diego. We just don't. About 85% of the calls that my fellow police officers go to are about homelessness. It's about overdoses. It's about people being stabbed or shot on the street, being raped. It's ugly out there. It's very dangerous. The crime stats don't show this because these people don't report it. I've had to do first aid for these people and had them die underneath me. It's got to be a serious approach to this and not just touting off phony statistics when we're going to help people. One of the things that we talk about with his plan, he calls it compassion, when we got to talk to people 4 times. They already know that the problem is that they're not supposed to be out there on the street. Okay, we don't have to have a sign up on the wall like he has done. We don't have to warn them 4 times. They understand that. We don't have enough police to go out there and contact them 4 times before we take enforcement. Do I want to take them to jail? Not at all. If anybody out there thinks they're more compassionate about the homeless than me, please, let's just compare our records. I'm out there all the time saving lives. I love these people. I'm friends with them. They share notes with me about what it's like in these horrible camping sites that the mayor has set up, the crimes that go unreported there. This is not the San Diego that I want to, we're going to change this. This is not the place where I want to raise my kids. This is not the San Diego I remember. When I came back to San Diego 9 years ago after my 23 years in the Marine Corps, you know, I was very unrecognizable in some of these areas. We solved humanitarian crises overseas in a matter of weeks or months. This has been going on for decades and it's doubled under his watch.
Can I just ask a clarifying
Absolutely.
question? Did you imply with that you wanted to close the safe camping spots that he has opened in Balboa Park?
Is this 2 minutes? There we go. So what I said earlier on was we have to put a tourniquet on this and we have to stop them. So on day 1, I have to keep that. I want them to stay in there for the shortest amount of time we can until we get the beds for them. Everyone deserves a bed. This is one of the richest cities in the history of the world. This is one of the richest countries in the history of the world. It's a very low bar to say, to have a bed for every person out on the street, every San Diegan that's suffering out there. But according to the mayor, the Boise case, he was against that. The Boise case just said that you had to have something better to offer them than what they had on the street. I want to offer that.
Mayor Gloria has the next question.
Yeah, so you can respond to that in the context of this question. I did see some polling recently that showed that District 3, which includes downtown, was showing residents there were experiencing and feeling like the homeless situation was improving, but every other district was reporting that it was getting worse. Are you merely pushing the problem around? What can you point to that shows that it has gotten better over the last 4 years, not just all the steps that have been taken, but that it has improved?
Sure. Well, probably the best statistic would be the monthly counts that we have in downtown San Diego that in May of 2023 showed over 2,000 homeless people on the streets of downtown San Diego. The count this month is about 800. Those folks, in many cases, have gone to the more than 900 new shelter beds that we've created in the last 12 months alone. And I have plans to add another 1,000 beds at Kettner and Vine and another 200 plus safe parking spaces at H Barracks. By the way, both of those are proposals that my opponent opposes. And so what I've discovered is a real inconsistency, a really chaotic approach to this issue from my opponent here, who opposed the grant's past decision, saying that it criminalizes homelessness. But he's here tonight telling you that he wants to end our progressive enforcement model, something that he should know is not possible to do because it's the subject of a piece of legal settlement. So we can't do that unilaterally. It's surprising that he does not know that. Here's the deal. We have to provide services in every council district. And you've seen me recently take an item to the city council asking them for their input on where in their districts they would provide more shelter spaces. And we're working right now. Just on Tuesday, the council authorized me to advance a short-term shelter strategy where I intend to put more shelters across our city, because every neighborhood in the city has some level of homelessness. And so therefore, all of us have a responsibility to take some action on this issue. Scott, here at the bottom line is this. We have a crisis on our streets. There's no two ways about it. And I'm not here tonight saying mission accomplished. Far from it. One homeless person is too many in this city. And so we absolutely have to continue to do the work. And what you've seen is I have the backbone to build more shelters. And when we do that, the situation improves. My opponent consistently opposes new shelters, and that is a recipe for leaving very sick and vulnerable people to deteriorate on our sidewalks in a city, state, and nation as wealthy as ours. You're right, Larry. That should not happen. We are doing our best to clean that up, and we could use more help, not more opposition.
Andrew, it's your turn to ask the next question on this topic.
Let's talk about what ends a person's homelessness, and that is housing. In the past few years, San Diego has built thousands of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. These are mostly small cottages, small apartment buildings sometimes, in the backyard of a single-family home. All of these ADUs are for rent, but a new state law allows cities to allow homeowners to sell off their ADUs separately from the primary house as a condominium. And the goal is to create more affordable, attainable homeownership opportunities. Mayor Gloria, if you're given a second year, would you support implementing this law in San Diego? And what role do you think that single-family neighborhoods should play in our city's effort to build more housing?
I love the question. Thank you, Andrew. Throughout my career, the through line has been housing. I'm passionate about housing issues, and throughout my career and every job that I've had, I've tried my very best to expand housing opportunities. You talk about a form of housing that we don't do nearly enough of, which is non-subsidized for-sale housing opportunities. Our staff is currently evaluating that state piece of legislation to see how we can implement it here, along with other pieces of state legislation that I think can help us address this crisis. And look at what we're doing, Andrew. You saw historically our city has permitted roughly 5,000 new homes per year. Last year, we hit nearly 10,000 new homes. It's a good increase, but we have to do more in order to make sure that working and middle-class people can afford to live in San Diego. My parents are blue-collar workers who were able to buy a home in San Diego just a generation ago, and yet my brother and I are both renters in this city. We have to change that if we're going to make sure that working and middle-class people can find a future for themselves here. So what you described, Andrew, is an important part. We have a lot of market rate housing. There's no question about that. We're putting up great numbers for the production of more low and very low income housing, but we have to do more than that. But where we have not done nearly enough is in that middle income part of our housing ladder. And what my opponent has consistently said is that he does not believe there is a housing crisis, which is painfully out of touch with every single one of us that sat down to write a check for our rent for this month earlier this week. We have to build more housing to increase the supply, to bring down the cost so we can put more money back in your pocket. So yes, Andrew, I'm going to always use an all-of-the-above approach to try and build more housing that is attainable to working and middle-class people. And going forward, that means that some of our neighborhoods will change. But Andrew, I guarantee you it'll change either because we built new stuff or because the people currently living in those homes are going to have to relocate somewhere else because they can't continue to afford to live here. We will not be a great American city if we don't have a working and middle class. That necessarily requires us to build more homes.
Mr. Turner, again, the question is, should homeowners be allowed to sell off their ADUs separately from the primary residence? And what role should single-family neighborhoods play in our efforts to build more housing?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't think that should be something San Diego follows. So, just getting back to what really does cause the affordable problem in San Diego, and it is not a number of housing. We have a glut of housing. Every place you go to in the city, if you drive around, you'll see is leasing. There's spaces there. The problem is it's not affordable. So to just continue to build more in the hopes that it's just going to lower the prices, that's not happening here in San Diego. And there's a reason for that. The outside investors that come to San Diego are the ones that are raising the prices. And they donate money to our mayor, and he allows them to then knock down homes in single-family neighborhoods, and he allows them to build small apartment complexes there. What that does is these outside investors come in and offer 130% of a value of a home because they know that return on investment is going to be huge with these permits that they're getting. I mean, one of the people who have been devastated by this over in the Logan community is in the audience right now. The mayor's own campaign manager's husband got his permits expedited so that they could have this huge monster of an apartment complex. If you drive over there, you'll see it. It looks like a little tiny house like in the movie Up that's right next to it, blocking them, shading them. Hey, just put in their solar panels, totally shading them out. This is not the approach we take here. We got to get back to common sense here. Same thing with the short-term vacation rentals. They're totally out of whack right now, the rules with that. He thinks there's enforcement on it. There is not. There are so many people out there that are taking advantage of being overlooked by how we're doing this. And again, whenever somebody from outside of San Diego looks at this and they see an opportunity to pay cash, an outside investor, to buy one of these homes, what does that do? It takes away a home for a young San Diegan couple who can't afford it. You know, maybe they got a mortgage, you know, they were already approved for $1 million. They come there, they offer the $1 million asking price, and now it's being sold for $1.3 million to outside investors. So, you know, I would just tell you that the other thing that we really got to focus on too is the mayor inserting information about redlining in the southeast area. There's some things that just don't make sense for a San Diego that's supposed to be compassionate for the people that can't afford the housing right now.
Okay, Mr. Turner, we're going to wrap it there. We're going to move on to our next topic now, public safety. Not just safety from crime, but also safety from accidents and disasters. Our first question on that topic will be from Scott Lewis of Voice of San Diego, and it will go to Mayor Gloria.
Okay. So, Mayor Gloria, you've done a lot to try to recruit officers, to try to keep them happy, and yet we consistently hear complaints about morale, about people leaving for other departments, and a lot of them point to one thing, and that was your insistence that the officers get the COVID vaccine, and even offering consequences if they didn't. Even the new police chief was one of those who protested. Do you regret your approach to that?
No, I don't. And the reason for that, I mean, he laughs at it, but when we made that policy, we had, I think, approximately 200 police officers out sick that day. We had over 100 firefighters out sick that day. My number one responsibility as mayor is to keep you and your family safe. How can you possibly do that with hundreds of police officers and firefighters unable to come to work because they were COVID positive? We had to get this problem under control if we were going to protect our citizens and restart our economy. I had to make the tough decisions. That's what being mayor is about, and I don't regret doing that. And importantly, Scott, that is the only thing that can be pointed at. When you look at what we've done to increase pay, improve benefits, provide tools like smart streetlights and license plate readers to make sure that officers can catch bad guys and bring them to justice, I have done everything I possibly can to keep San Diego safe, and the stats show it. We are one of the safest big cities in America because we've properly resourced our public safety professionals. Now, my opponent has told, I believe you, that he thinks that their police officers are overpaid and that we should reduce their benefits. But he said also a moment ago that we don't have enough police officers. Well, Larry, how in the world are you going to recruit more police officers if you start cutting their pay and reducing their benefits? It doesn't make sense. That's probably why you shouldn't make him mayor. But the bottom line is this, Scott. We have to keep each other safe. Being safe is the number one thing that I do as mayor, and so whether that is fully funding our police department, our fire department, our lifeguards, our paramedics, that is what I've done, and the record speaks for itself. We are a safe city. We can always do better. It's much like the homeless question a moment ago. Even one crime is a crime too many. But what we're doing is making sure that our officers are well-resourced, and that trend line for recruitment isn't changed. We are retaining officers. We're actually recruiting officers from other departments at this point because we have improved pay and benefits, and we've got a new police chief that people are very excited about. I believe we're turning the corner on this. The data backs it up both in crime statistics and our officer retention numbers.
Mr. Turner, you did tell me that you thought it was time for the city to consider changing the future benefits for future police officers, future firefighters. Is that something you would pursue? And what kinds of challenges might that present that you could address for recruitment?
Yeah, I don't think I said it exactly that way. What I said was we would look at everything instead of what's going to happen with this type of spending problem that we have with the mayor, is that bankruptcy might be something that happens to San Diego if we don't change course right away. And what I said was, when you asked, well, would we consider everything? And I said, yes, we would consider everything. That's the way the question went, and that's how I answered it. So back to that, though, when we talk about the pension benefits of the police officers, they're pretty comparable to most police departments in the city. And I would in no way want to change that, okay? That's just a fact. We might be forced to do some things, but that wouldn't be because of me, that would be because of the bad spending we've had for the last 4 years. But getting back to the issue and the number of police officers and how that affects us here in San Diego, when I said earlier that 85% of the calls police are going to are homeless related, and then you say, well, I said we had a shortage of officers. Yes, if we keep following your plan on homelessness. The officers are running from call to call that's a homeless related call, and they're not going to the people's houses when they got burglarized. They're not going to the car crashes fast enough. I'm just going to tell you the truth. Yesterday, somebody tried to steal my car in Ocean Beach, of all places. Right there outside of the, I won't mention the store. You know where it's at, though, Scott. I was right outside. They were leaving the car. They were trying to hotwire it, and they took off when I showed up. An hour and 8 minutes. An hour and 8 minutes I had to wait on hold before somebody picked it up. You know, it's all about not just having the number of officers, but us being able to know as an officer where we need to go and what we need to do. That requires somebody on the other end of the phone. And I challenged you last time. The 4th floor at the police department is where the call-taking center is. So many empty desks there because they're fleeing this department for places that pay more. So it's not just about the police officer on the street. It's about getting that intel of where do we need to go. If I'm out there and I get asked, what do we need, more police or more call takers? I would take call takers because I can get to a call long before the culprit has walked away for an hour. So here we are now in San Diego where we got to look at what are police doing. And I've got some great plans for non-sworn officers that can help make up the difference so police can go do police work.
And Mr. Turner, we might be able to get to those plans later. Andrew, you've got the next question.
In 2015, San Diego set a goal of ending all traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2025. That deadline is now just a few months away, but the city's own data show that traffic deaths are more common today than they were when that goal was adopted a decade ago. Why do you think this is? Why are traffic deaths going up? And what would you do as mayor to protect San Diegans from traffic violence? Mr. Turner?
Yeah, you know, getting back to my last answer, because it rolls right into this one, it's about the officers that are not allowed to go do the things they need, the proactive work that we used to experience before the homeless crisis that exploded underneath this mayor. So officers are not out doing the traffic enforcement. I know we all don't want tickets. We all don't want to get that pulled over by that motorcycle cop. But the motorcycle cops in San Diego, who that's their job, is traffic, is they're going to domestic violence calls. They're covering me when I go out to a drug sales call. They're not doing the traffic enforcement. I've been at intersections where, unfortunately, somebody runs a red light right in front of me, and I know a lot of people say, man, why didn't that cop pull them over? Because I'm on my way to an ex-boyfriend kicking a door in for a woman who he tried to hurt before and has a restraining order. So, you know, back to the traffic deaths, that's a big part of it. We're not doing that traffic enforcement that we used to do. And again, as much as you don't like tickets, just knowing those officers are out there sometimes makes you slow down a little bit. When that light turns yellow, you put on the brake, and that's just one of those safety features we need. I would tell you also, you know, on the bicycle fatalities, the number of bicycle and vehicle fatalities, vehicle versus bicycle fatalities, has really gone through the roof. And I think a big part of that is the bicycle lanes that the mayor has put in place. And I understand that's part of you know, his idea on climate action and other things. But unfortunately, in the haste of putting those in place, they were put in unsafely. And I'll just tell you this, I think it was last Thursday or Tuesday, the city settled a lawsuit, $7 million for a wrongful death of a bicyclist in one of these poorly made bicycle lanes. I'm not against bicycle lanes. They just got to be in the right place. I know sometimes, you know, we live in this binary approach of, well, you're on this side of the argument or this side of the argument. I like bike lanes. I want to ride my bike. They just got to be made safely to where people aren't dying. And obviously, the city government realizes it was done inappropriately because they wouldn't have settled for $7 million. They would have taken it to court and made sure that, you know, everybody understood it wasn't their fault, but it was their fault. So in the haste to try to make traffic safer, to try to decrease the number of cars out on the street, let's make some smart choices out there. And again, on the enforcement side, we need to step that up too and have the police to do that, not out taking care of homeless crisis.
Thank you. Mayor Gloria, what's your diagnosis for why traffic deaths have gone up so much? And what can you do as mayor, what would you do in a second term to protect San Diegans from traffic violence?
Well, I would do what he's saying the opposite of. Larry, the road that gentleman was killed upon doesn't have a bike lane. And I think it's probably your point, Andrew, is that we have too much of our infrastructure that is only made for one thing and one thing only, and that's the car. My traffic and transportation plan is about giving you choices. You should have the option to be able to walk safely to where you want to go, take high-quality transit, ride a bicycle safely, or take your car if that's your choice. But that's not the system that we have. And we're building a different system now to try and make our commitments under Vision Zero, as well as our commitments under our landmark climate action plan. But that's in progress now. And there are growing pains associated with that. There's definitely people who like to demonize and talk against bike lanes, not understanding that this is one of the best ways that we can protect people. I was talking to Scott just a moment ago about my responsibilities to keep you safe. This is one of the ways that we can do that. To your observation about the increasing number of traffic fatalities and injuries, that is true. But the data shows that when we install protected bikeways, those numbers come down. And that should be a call to all of us to do this faster. You've seen me push Sandag to build more of these. We just dedicate the new Pershing Bikeway, which is beautiful and will certainly help more people stay safe on a roadway that killed 2 people in 1 year alone. We're going to continue on this path because it's the right thing to do. And yes, there will be voices of opposition and criticism, but the job of mayor is to keep you safe, and this is why we must do this. And yes, Vision Zero is a big part of it, but so is our climate action plan. We are nothing if we're not our good weather, and that's at stake in this climate crisis. And making sure that people have choices on how they get from A to B is one of the ways that we can tackle that effectively. So in this year's budget, we put money aside for our 10 deadliest intersections to try and improve those and make them safer. We're constantly implementing new state laws that are focused on trying to improve safety for all users of our transportation network. But this is a work in progress, Andrew, and I hope that you know that I feel the urgency of working on this issue, that even in a year where we had a difficult budget, we still put good money towards our Vision Zero plans.
Jamie, you're next to ask a question about public safety.
Thank you. More than 1,000 homes were lost in the January flood. And now hundreds of people are suing the city for failing to maintain a key drainage channel along Choyas Creek. It's not the first time that there's been flooding there, and it's not the first time the city has been sued over it. Mayor Gloria, the day after the storm, you said there isn't a drainage system anywhere that could have accommodated all of the rain that fell that day. Yet the city also remains woefully behind in addressing its stormwater upkeep. So are you saying that San Diegans should expect these catastrophic events from happening as we see bigger and bigger, more intense storms? Or do you have a plan moving forward for protecting people?
Yes, we do. And let me say right at the outset that what happened on January 22nd was a tragedy. And as you said, hundreds of homes impacted, thousands of San Diegans that were harmed. And in the aftermath of that very tragic event, you saw the city galvanize and come together to provide an emergency response. Immediately, I declared an emergency in the city of San Diego. We set about the recovery efforts and clearing out thousands of tons of debris from those channels under an emergency declaration. And subsequently, we've established a $7 million fund partnering with the County of San Diego to help the storm survivors that are there, and worked effectively with our federal partners, including the very helpful assistance of our Vice President Kamala Harris to get a FEMA natural disaster declaration to further help with the recovery. To your question about going forward, we identified this issue before January 22nd. Years before, I was able to secure $733 million from the federal government to do stormwater improvements throughout the city of San Diego, but particularly about 40% of that money is earmarked for the Choyas Creek. And those projects are getting underway now. I wish it could be faster. None of this stuff is quick. One of the after actions we've done since the storm event on January 22nd is work with a state assembly member, David Alvarez, to pass legislation to allow us to do channel clearance faster and with less red tape. That bill was signed by Governor Newsom just a few days ago. And so we are learning the lessons of January 22nd. We're acting aggressively to clear the channels and to maintain them as such, to provide direct assistance to the folks who are impacted, and to use that $700+ million from our federal government to make the long-term permanent improvements to address that issue. Last thing I would say about that is that, yes, it's not me saying that we couldn't do it. It's our engineers that said that there's no way to engineer something that could have handled that amount of water in that storm event. Even so, going forward, we have a real challenge, and this is something that we have to learn from because the climate is changing, and I do believe we'll experience events like this going forward, but we'll do it with the benefit of seeing what happened, learning from it, and doing better going forward.
I have a quick follow-up for you. Prior to Tropical Storm K in 2022, you issued an emergency declaration and ended up cleaning a lot of the channels out. Did you consider doing that in advance of that January 22nd storm? I believe On Thursday prior, there was a prediction of about 1.5 to 2 inches of rain.
No, and the reason for that is, yes, that was a prediction. The difference was the amount of rain being compressed in a very short amount of time and focused in a micro burst over a very constrained geographic area. It completely changed the game. No one predicted it would be quite like this. What we've done is to make sure that using that order going forward, that we've cleared all those areas out. And in a difficult budget year, with the 2 areas where we increased funding was homelessness and transportation and stormwater. So we have the resources to make sure that those channels stay clear.
Mr. Turner, would you like to address this issue on Troyes Creek?
Yeah, just talking about the creek side of it. I know the mayor has before talked about some restrictions that the state had put on us, and then subsequently after the flood we found out that those were relaxed over a year before. So when they talk about the engineers, of course a lot of the numbers that come out of the city there are his employees. You'll see a lot of that. The engineers who say nothing could have stopped this 2.7 inches of rain. Everywhere in the country 2.7 inches of rain is just a rainy day. It's not a flood where people die. And again, you know, I still never hear an apology. I hear, well, this is bad, this is terrible. I'm sorry for not funding this. And for somebody to be in power for 18 years, an elected official in San Diego, not always the mayor. You haven't been elected for 18 years?
No, you should check your math.
Okay. So for 18 years, an elected official. He's been the mayor now for almost 4 years. We can just say 4, it's almost over. And the money has not been put toward it. Even right now, they call for about $250 million of upkeep to that stormwater system, and even after the floods, the mayor has only approved about $50 million. So although that is an increase from what he did before, that's still not there. You know, we have victims of the flood that are here with us today, people who actually survived it, that need to hear an apology, that want to see that step forward, so the people who have their houses destroyed, they can get those permits put in place. And you know, at the last debate, the mayor said, oh, there's no more fees for permit. There are. I understand that the city has waived a permit. There are school permits, there's other county and state permits. And you can say, well, you know, that's not our responsibility for those, but it was your responsibility to take care of a basic need of a neighborhood, and you didn't do it. So I would think that you would want to pay those fees for those people in that neighborhood to make up for it. And why are people still living in hotels? Seriously, how many months has it been now? And people are still living in hotels waiting for this to happen. This is unsat for a city of our size, and to be as compassionate as we are, to have people that are running out of hotel money from the city when it was the city's fault that this happened. You know, and again, red tape, rules from the state. I'm going to be the kind of mayor that takes care of San Diego first. And if it even took breaking some rules, I'd get in that bulldozer and knock those trees down. That's the truth. I really would.
Move on.
The trees are what caused it. He left them in there.
Okay, we've got to move on to our next topic. It's our final topic tonight, Money Matters. And we're not just talking about managing the city's nearly $6 billion budget, but also about city taxes and fees that affect the budget of every resident in San Diego. Our first question on this topic will be from KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen.
After housing, transportation is often the largest expense for San Diego households. Mayor Gloria, you were elected in 2020 on promises of promoting more affordable and sustainable transportation options like public transit and biking, and you pledged to take a more active role at Sandag, which you mentioned earlier. You have not just a seat on the board of directors, but the most powerful seat on the board of directors. You haven't attended a Sandag meeting in 12 months. Since you became mayor, you've only shown up to 50% of Sandag board meetings. So why have you not been more present at Sandag? And if you're reelected, should we expect your attendance record to improve?
So, Andrew, I want to be very clear with this answer. The city of San Diego is always represented at that meeting.
Yes, but you were not there.
I understand that, but I don't think your viewers would understand that based on the way you asked the question. If I'm not there, my alternate is there. And we have a very capable council member who goes on my behalf, and his knowledge in this space is very helpful to the city for succession planning, for all kinds of stuff. So we are represented, and we cast our votes at Sandag, and it is a very important place to be. Reminder that I did get on the board, and for the first 2 years I was mayor, I served as vice chair of that board. After 2022, there was a change in leadership, and I thought that it was an appropriate time to allow new leadership to ascend at the board and to allow one of our council members to have a more active role there. It isn't to say I'm not actively engaged in this. I am. I have staff that look at this all the time. I'm briefed on it constantly. I meet regularly with the CEO of Sandag. We are active in that conversation, and you see that by the dollars that are coming to San Diego. The Pershing Bikeway was a budget amendment that was necessary to get that done. We're doing doing the same thing right now on the Normal Street Promenade. Again, using our leadership at Sandag to bring more resources to the city of San Diego to improve the lives of San Diego residents. Our current approach is working. If I find that it doesn't work, we'll make an adjustment. But the bottom line is Sandag is a very important organization in our county, and their $1 billion plus budget is one that we have to have representation at so that we get our fair share of resources. And San Diego is doing that. And it goes back to your previous question, Andrew. This is precisely one of the ways that we can address our Vision Zero obligations to meet my vision of giving people options when going from A to B. This is a critical part of our infrastructure strategy, and it's working not just for getting money out of Sandag, but also leveraging those Sandag dollars to get funding from the state and federal government. This is more important than ever with the bipartisan infrastructure law being in place for San Diego to compete. Just today, we announced over $1 billion in funding coming to the city of San Diego from our state and federal partners. What my administration is doing is working, and the results are evident in the dollars that are flowing to our city.
Brief follow-up. Do you believe that the direction that Sandag is headed with the next regional transportation plan, which is supposed to be adopted next year, are they headed in the right direction? Are you happy with the way things are going?
Well, they're still formulating it, right? We have our existing adopted plan that's very aggressive, and I agree with the general aspirations of that, which aligns with my vision of multiple choices on how to get to A to B. That plan was a plan I supported and voted for. The new plan as it's being developed, it remains to be in flux in what will be there. Ultimately, my eye is making sure that we're going to hit the mode share shifts that are required under our climate action plan, and that will be telling about whether or not the city of San Diego will use our voting power to support it or if we'll oppose it. But again, it's in process right now.
Mr. Turner, I think it's safe to say you're at least skeptical of the bike lanes you mentioned earlier. You want us to spend our transportation dollars on roads and freeways because, frankly, most people drive. Cars are a very expensive form of transportation. There are the costs to society in terms of air pollution, noise, road maintenance, and then there are, of course, the direct costs to the consumer. There's gas, insurance. I just had to pay a $1,300 car repair bill today. If cars are your priority, what would you do to make transportation more affordable for San Diegans?
Yeah, I kind of disagree with you on this binary choice, right? Again, I'm an independent. I'm a lifelong independent, but it seems like we're always trying to put people either in this camp or this camp. I mean, earlier, the mayor says I was against his plan for a certain homeless location. No, his plan I was. At that location, I changed the plan, talked to the people in the neighborhood. We came up with a really good plan to bring homeless vets to the H barracks, a historically old boot camp for the Navy. And so it's not that I'm against, there are things in the middle. I'm not against the bike lanes. I would like to see less people driving cars. I certainly would. We're just not at that place right now where we should force that upon people. And the mayor keeps talking about choices, but it really isn't choices. When we decrease the amount of parking, when we take parking away from the streets, even with his ADU program where we don't require more parking for these, you're driving people away from a car. I drive an electric vehicle. You know, I understand. I'm trying to better the environment. I make decisions all the time with cleaning the rivers or cleaning the beaches, and I try to be a good role model for my kids in doing that. You know, the mayor's driving a V8 up here that's putting out a lot of exhaust. The mayor is not doing anything about getting more electric vehicles into the city. I know we get a few for some of the parking enforcement people, but these are steps that we got to take that make serious decisions from a mayor that are going to impact our lives in this regard. So, you know, it isn't against the bike lanes. Some of them are on very busy streets where they could have just been moved over one block onto a parallel road where there was far less traffic, and that would have probably reduced traffic fatalities as well. So, you know, if you got to be here, if this is a crisis and you really need to make this happen by going to Sandag meetings, well, then don't travel as much. You know, why are you in Vegas so much? Why are you in China? Why are you in Davos? Why are you in Korea? Why are you in Mexico City? You didn't go to Davos?
No, another
okay.
fact you got wrong.
All right, Davos. He did not go to Davos everywhere. He went everywhere else but Davos. These are the things that you need to be present for. It's about leadership. You know, I think we have a different understanding of the definition of leadership. All right, what you think is it's all about, you know, this going around to the people, looking right at the right time, ribbon cutting. I'm about doing the work. When you say we did this and we did that in the city, I'm the we. I'm the one that's been doing it, not you.
I'm gonna have to
You're implementing my plans that I forward up to you.
I've got to cut you off there, Mr. Turner. Would you like to respond, Mayor Gloria?
I don't think there's enough time tonight, Amita. I would just say, yeah, I did go to China to bring back some pandas to our San Diego Zoo, and I think you all kind of like that. But importantly, he did not answer the question that you asked him, Andrew. And what he doesn't want to say is that he doesn't care about whether or not you're safe when you're commuting about our city. I do, and that's why I should continue to be the mayor, and he should never get near the mayor's office.
Jamie, you get to ask the next question, unless you'd like to respond.
Yeah, sure. It is about safety. It is about driving and having an expensive thing with the cost of living in San Diego that's going through the roof, having opportunities to travel safer and have other opportunities, but we don't right now. Bike lanes, that's it. We have an MTS system that's unsafe, it's dirty, we still aren't at pre-COVID levels of people using it. We see empty buses driving around, emitting the horrible emissions all day long because they have horrible routes. These are the things we can do. We used to have a task force that worked with the police and the sheriff's department to keep our trolleys safe. When he came in, he disbanded it. Now, lots of shootings, lots of crime on the trolley. Of course nobody's going to use that choice.
Jamie, you get the next question.
Let's talk about taxes. Mr. Turner, you said you do not support the penny increase on the ballot this November, but really want you to dig in here. Why don't you support it? And given all of the obligations that the city is facing, including beyond stormwater, $6 billion in infrastructure needs over the next 5 years, how would you pay for all of this?
So it's not a 1 cent tax, okay? That's a misnomer to get people to think that it's just going to be a penny on your dollar, all right? That is a penny on the dollar, but we're not just buying cups of coffee. We're buying cars, we're buying washers and dryers, we're buying refrigerators. And everybody will tell you, every specialist is, the poorest among us are the ones that suffer with an increase in a sales tax. The rest of us, we can just drive to another city where we don't have to pay that. The people who don't have that opportunity are the ones that are going to be having this money taken from them off of their work. So, I don't want to see an irresponsible mayor who has made numerous poor decisions on the spending. We could talk about 101 Ash Street. All right, we doubled the price of a lease for you to purchase it. And why did you purchase it? Why did you purchase 101 Ash Street? Perhaps it was when the lawsuit was coming out, where you were going to have to be deposed and you were going to be providing testimony and emails to talk about the backroom deals with this. That is why we bought 101 Ash instead of continuing the lease. We also had a free sports arena offered to San Diego. Anybody can read about this in detail on La Prensa, okay? La Prensa does some hard-hitting investigative journalism here in San Diego. They have outlined the free sports arena the city was offered, but instead, Mr. Termini, who offered the mayor his largest contribution, he gets a contract for billions of dollars to rebuild sports arena. These are the kind of poor mismanagement, poor spending that I don't want to see continue in San Diego, and if we give them that money, they're going to continue down that path. I would just tell you this. He's raised the wages of his staff by 44%. With that and all the increases in pay that have happened in the city of San Diego over his tenure, that's a $500 million increase in our obligations in paychecks. So if this tax went into place, that's going to be about $450, $500 million that the city's going to get. That's only going to cover his increase in pay. I've already been told that this week, all of the directorates in the city are looking at 15% cuts across the board if we don't get this tax.
I'm sorry to jump in, but we've got to wrap it there. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond to what Mr. Turner just said, and then you can take Jamie's question.
There was a lot in there that is not, but I think the question was about how are we as a city going to tackle our infrastructure deficit? He doesn't know about it, but let me share with all of you. It is a $9 billion price tag. I mean, as you started at the beginning, our city's general fund is $2 billion. $9 billion over the next 5 years against a $2 billion general fund. We will never get ahead of repairing our roads, fixing those storm channels, repairing our public facilities without new resources. How many mayors have told you that they'll get around to it and it never happens? This mayor is about solving this problem once and for all.
Yeah, I'm going to say something about that, all right?
I'm sorry,
if it was earmarked for infrastructure, maybe we would buy it. Maybe we would. But you didn't earmark it for infrastructure. Also, if it had a sunset clause on it, if we really could trust you, we could vote for it again in 5 years.
Mr. Turner,
but
we really have to move on. Jamie has a question to ask Mayor Gloria.
Thank you very much. Mayor Gloria, you had 30 seconds to speak on this issue. My question is the same. Why do you support the sales tax? Why does the city need it so much? And what would you tell people in the community that might have questions about how it will be spent? Because you're not actually required to say before the vote.
Yeah. Well, I've been unequivocal and very clear. This is to address our infrastructure deficit. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I've spent the first term as mayor quantifying the size of our infrastructure deficit. That number is about $9.3 billion in costs over the next 5 years. We don't have $9.3 billion. So for all of you who are rightfully upset about the poor condition of our city roads, let me tell you, under his plan, you will continue to have potholed streets in every neighborhood. Under my plan, if this passes in November, and it's up to the voters to do it, we will finally have the resources to address this. Jamie, every year we balance the city's budget. We pay our pension bill on time. We pay our bills on time. But the way we often do it is by putting off the costs like you might do in your own home. Maybe this is not the year that you can afford to put a new roof. Well, the city's been making that decision for decades, and you see it all over the city. Our Ocean Beach Pier is shuttered with no hope for reopening until we find a lot of money. Ball field lights all across the city in every neighborhood do not currently function. They need to be replaced. And of course, our potholes, our storm channels, our public facilities, on and on. The locker rooms at our police department, they need to be repaired. But with that deficit I've described to you, there's no way to feasibly do it. I have always been willing to make the tough choices, and I've always been honest with my constituents. When you see the size of that price tag and you know what our current budget is, you know there's no way to belt tighten this and actually resolve it. It is a recipe for continued deterioration of our public assets, and I don't want that. And so we've given the voters of San Diego the opportunity to consider how to address this issue. I asked San Diegans to vote yes on Measure E because it will fundamentally change the way that we finance infrastructure in this city and finally repair the damn roads that for so long have been potholed all over the city.
And I've got to end it there with you, Mayor Gloria. But Scott, you have the final question. However, because we're running out of time, each of you only have 1 minute to answer this time around.
Okay. Mayor Gloria, you are, and the city is about to put a fee on trash collection for single-family homes, most single-family homes. The city's about to continue increasing water rates sharply. We pay some of the highest electricity rates. Gas prices, you talked about the sales tax that could go up. What relief can you realistically tell San Diegans is on the way for their enormous cost of living?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you listing those because first off, with regard to water rates, I've used the city's voting power at the County Water Authority to push back against unnecessary rate increases, and we've done that successfully. They have not been as big as they proposed, and that does put money back in the pockets of San Diegans. With regard to electricity, we've stood up San Diego Community Power to provide an alternative in the energy space to help bring down and provide some competition in that space. The other is with regard to gases. I have been opposed to the vehicle mile fee because I believe this is not appropriate to do it on a regional level with a gas tax. And so we will continue to take those positions because it is about making sure that more people can make ends meet in this town. But Scott, the real answer to your question is we have to get control of the cost of housing in this community. We have to grow the supply of housing to bring down rents and to make for sale prices more affordable. You've seen my administration work aggressively to build more housing to do precisely that. My opponent has said there is no housing crisis. He has no understanding of what you and I are paying for housing in this community. That is one of the best ways a mayor can help bring down the cost of living in our city.
Mr. Turner, you suggested that one way that the city could close its deficit is to look at all the capital funds set aside for infrastructure projects, ball fields, lights, bridges, all kinds of things across the city. You would deplete those and use those for the deficit. What would you tell the neighbors that have been hoping for so many of those projects for so long?
Well, if we're really in an emergency, which I think we are, we have human beings dying on the street. We got overdoses, we've got crime increase. This is a thing that we cannot survive as a city unless we tackle those. So some of those special revenue funds that you talked about, I understand that. But if it truly is an emergency, we're not going to be raising taxes. We're not going to get a bond. We're going to go in and try to access as much of that as we can. We're going to look into the legalities of it, but there's about $1 billion in there. We can make some really good improvements to the roads with that. Right now, our infrastructure is a joke. You know, I have people from outside of the state that don't want to bring their organizations into San Diego because of the crime, the homeless on the street, nothing's being done about, and that our infrastructure doesn't support it. We have businesses fleeing because of it. So if it is a crisis, which I think it is, then we need to look at taking those. But, you know, if we're going to be looking at the infrastructure and really focusing on that, it's something that, again, it's part of a city's basic understanding of what a mayor needs to do. It's about making people safe and having an infrastructure that's going to support a city.
Okay.
He's failed on that, and we've had to hear about damn roads for way too long. We've got to close it there because we've got to get to closing statements. So as we come to the end of this hour, it's now time for closing statements from the candidates. Each of you gets 90 seconds to make your case to San Diego's voters. First up, Larry Turner. Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to do this, and thank you all for being here and everybody that's watching it right now too. But you know, getting back to visions and talking about a vision, the mayor has had a vision 4 years ago, and he didn't get there. Okay, so I think that says a lot about leadership, about executive leadership, about management. If you had a vision and you didn't get there, which I think he can admit that he's not where he wanted to be at the end of this 4-year term. And this is a 4-year term. It's not halftime. He's not guaranteed 8. It's time to look about going in a different direction. If he wants to change his vision and he can sell you on that with misinformation, then go ahead and vote for that. If you want to see that change in the city, you really want to see us bring it back to that San Diego we all remember, where it was safe, our kids could go to the playground without having to worry about what's happening there, without armed private security, being in Balboa Park at the restrooms. That's the kind of city I want to have come back, is what I remember growing up in. So I can bring my kids to the park. And let them enjoy the beaches. There's a difference in opinion here on the way we should run a city. I look at it as the best ideas are coming from the neighborhoods, the planning groups, the community associations. You all know what you need in your neighborhoods. Just because you become a mayor, it doesn't really increase your IQ. You sit at the top of a building. We want a mayor who is not going to do things to us, but do things for us and help empower us. The businesses in San Diego, they know what they're doing. They know how to turn on the economic engines of the city and really start to revive, put more green in everybody's pocket. You need a mayor who's going to do that and just do the basics of make it safe. I mean, right now, does anybody out there really feel safer? Do you feel the infrastructure is better? The answer to that is no.
Mayor Gloria.
Thank you to everyone for your time this evening. What you've heard tonight are two very different visions for our city. Mine is grounded in facts and real solutions, with a commitment to make tough choices and the experience to put our city on a better path. I've stood firm on public safety, supported our first responders, and as a result, San Diego is one of the safest big cities in America. I've tackled homelessness head-on, expanded shelter and services, banned tent encampments, and reformed our mental health laws. I'm doing the work to build more housing so that you can afford to call this city your home. And I've invested in infrastructure in every neighborhood, from roads to parks, streetlights to sidewalks. This is what I've done as your mayor. And it's why I've earned the endorsement of the Democratic Party, Planned Parenthood, our firefighters, lifeguards, and teachers. My opponent has no real plan for you or for your family. He has no solutions to the biggest challenges we face, like bringing down the cost of living. He is very good at pointing out problems, but he has no idea how to fix them. San Diego deserves a future that is bright and bold and full of new opportunities, not one that holds on to the past. And I love my hometown, and I know that we have so much more work to do, but we have laid the foundation for progress that will keep you safe, that will house our homeless, and that will fix our roads. So let's continue to work together to build the great city that I know that we can be. I respectfully ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mayor Gloria. That concludes the KPBS 2024 San Diego mayoral debate. We want to thank the candidates, Todd Gloria and Larry Turner, our panelists, Andrew Bowen, Jamie Self, and Scott Lewis, and our audience here in the studio. This debate will be available online at kpbs.org. You can also learn about all of the races on the November ballot by visiting kpbs.org/voterhub. Ballots are now on the way to voters, so now that the candidates have had their say, it is your turn to have yours by voting. Good night. Thank you.